Hello, hello, and welcome back. Now we're just going to repeat the process from this last video in which we're creating our selector drum racks. Here we have a snare from a drum pack that I have created. And essentially we're just going to repeat that same process where we go simpler to sampler. We open up our zone. We'll take all these snare samples. Drag them in. We hit select. We highlight all our samples. Distribute ranges equally. Now we go to our map. We select our selector. We hit map. Now we can choose in between these samples. Just rename it quick. And we'll essentially do the same thing with a hat right there. Simpler to sampler. Oh, that's drum sampler, sorry. Simpler to sampler. Zone. Select all. Distribute ranges equally. Map. And what I like to do is I like to have a kick, snare, hats, and a perk. Just keep it simple. And on these top 4 macros, what we're going to do is we're going to put effect settings for our actual drum racks. Now you can go ahead and slot these in with whatever samples you want. I'm just building a basic drum rack. For this channel, we're going to do a instrument rack on the second channel and a live sort of element based off of drum racks as well, in which you can play live notes or whatever you wish. Perfect. So now, if we go into our MIDI clip, we can see here that we have our 4 slots, right? And if you open up both views, both your channel and your MIDI clip view, you can actually see here that what we have on our MIDI clip is exactly what we have on our drum rack. So if I go ahead and rename this into hats, our drum rack now has it as hats. So for example, this is 1 bar loop. We'll change this into a 4-bar loop. And we'll do a simple drum pattern. And see, immediately we can change our snare sample to something else. Okay, we'll do that. We'll set this to -6. And set a hi-hat here. And on the go, you can just keep this. Cool. So the real power to this is in being able to automate the envelopes inside of your MIDI clips. So for instance, if I want to keep this drum selection live just in this MIDI clip, that's great. I have drums racked, kick select, and that's in your envelopes button right here. Now, let's say I take this MIDI clip and I duplicate it. And I would like to have a different sound selection as I go down. Well, all I would have to do is just get rid of this. So my first scene, second scene is the exact same, right? Now what we can do here is go into our second MIDI clip, right? And in our envelope settings, we have the track kick select, right? Let's say we want to have a different kick selected. We'll set it to 60. Let's say we want our snare to also sound different. Our hats also we want to change. Oh, sorry, I'm still on snare there. Our hats. So what you'll notice here is that when we change from MIDI clip to MIDI clip, since we have selected the envelope specifically for that MIDI clip, as we go down in our sequences, our sample selection changes. And you'll see that down here. Now, this is a super useful technique, not only for your drumming, but for your instrument selection as we go along. So I'm going to keep this fairly simple. Select another drum rack. Don't mind this. This is just my default settings, which I will have available in a different video. And let's make sure our chain selection is open here. So now let's go ahead and pick an instrument. You can go with something simple. .303 bass. And we will choose a 4-bar loop. Color coding is important. And we will rename this our instrument rack. One thing that's important here that will apply later on once we're actually connecting into TouchDesigner, it is actually detrimental to have your track numbers. I'm sorry, I don't have it here. At the start of your track. So all that you have to do here is simply slot in the hash number. And now my track number will be numbered next to the actual title that I put in. Now back to our Acid 303 rack. Also helpful tip within your grids, if you want to expand your grid sizing, you can see it here. You can go command 1 or 2 to go up and down. Command 3 to enter triplets, and command 4 to turn it off. Oh. Sorry, I'm actually doing this backwards. We're not going to use a drum rack for the instrument rack. We're going to just use a straight up instrument rack. There we go. The reason for that being is that if you notice here, this actually rolls up our whole piano roll, and we can actually play specific notes. Whereas doing it through the drum rack, you're just triggering that specific instrument with one MIDI note. There's no actual like tonality that you can pull out of it. So if we come in here, whoops. Just any note. C1 right here. Hold. It's a little better. And if we go back into our drum sample here, which again, you can see both as we go, you can have your actual mapping for your instrument right inside of the chain rack. And inside of your drum rack, you can have separate macros, which one of them we're going to use for our instrument selection, which will be in this chain here, similar to the zone sampling inside a simpler sampler. So for now, we just have the 303 rack. Let's pick something else. Let's just go with an 808. Perfect. Another thing we're going to do here, just right off the bat, is we're going to set our utility. Just a basic utility. Oh. At the end of our rack. And right away, we're going to map our gain. And we're going to put this to gain. Notice that we have our macros for our actual instrument and our macros for our rack, which are separate. Now, we can actually start mapping our chain selector here. And similar to the zone setting inside of the sampler, I can highlight these. I can go distribute ranges equally. Oh, sorry, these are meant to be all the way. Distribute ranges equally. And now we have a selection of 2. I can go to my map, click my selector. LFO 1 attack is what it's named right now, but I'll rename it to instrument select. Let's go inst select. Now this macro will allow me So yeah, that kind of explains in a very basic sense how you're able to switch in between drum samples and instruments within your rack. Now, for instance, let's say you had a sequence where you start with that initial drum sample that we had, and for your first scene here, you want to start with that basic 303 instrument, right? You would select your instrument select to just that selector here, envelopes, perfect. And if we go to our second clip, we're actually going to set it to our next instrument. Similar to what we were doing with the changes in our actual drum rack, right? So now if you go ahead so that's it for this video. And in the next video, we'll actually be touching up how we connect all of this to TouchDesigner inside of my already made template. Thank you so much.